Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Financially Fit Podcast. I am your host, Andre Creighton. I am excited to be here with you all today, and I'm excited to discuss the big, beautiful bill. I've taken some time to really just digest this bill. You know, um, there's good and bad to this bill, right? And I think that the reality around a bill like this is like we always look at it through the lens of how it impacts us personally, right? But the reality is that as a society, we need to move to a point where we think holistically around how does this impact society as a whole, not just myself, right? If you're maybe a very wealthy person, you look at this bill a lot differently than probably, someone who is just trying to get by, with the necessities, whether that's home or renting or, having money to put food on the table. You look at things quite differently. So, this bill is, I had a tough time with this one because, I see myself as a person that, I make good money. Me and my family, we do really well, and we're very fortunate to have what we have, right? But where I am today is not where I came from, right? So I'm a lot closer to people that are from the struggle than I am from people that are from very wealthy backgrounds, right? Well, maybe their family, owned a business, or maybe their family, their parents were a C-suite executive, right? Like I don't come from that. I come from living paycheck to paycheck. That is, getting by, figuring out ways to be creative with our money. Like that was the type of family lifestyle that I grew up on. So I had a really tough time with this one because I know that there are some benefits for me and my family given our current situation, but also I know that there's a lot of things within this bill that are going to hurt a lot of people that are very close to me, right? So today we're going to dive into the big beautiful bill, which is a piece of legislation that got politicians hyped, candidly, and quite frankly, economists are debating, and the middle class are holding their breath. Is quite frankly the best way that I could put this. So I guess let's start with like first, like what is the big beautiful bill? Like, when was it introduced? So this is something that was introduced back, I believe it was like May 20th was when this bill was introduced. And Trump, it got through the House and the Senate, and then back through the House, and then to Trump's desk to sign on July 4th on Independence Day. And I found myself on Independence Day really struggling to celebrate Independence Day in the way that I had in the past, not because I'm not American or I'm, not patriotic, but more so because I found myself thinking about my parents, right, that are in their 60s and 70s, who have worked a lot of their lives, and they, thinking about how is Medicare and like some of these cuts going to affect their ability to sustain the lifestyle that they live. So I found myself kind of just cornered in a way on July 4th and not really understanding um, how to be happy about the independence and being American in that day. Just thinking about how this is going to impact a lot of people in my life. So, at its core, this bill is really about rebuilding America, but it doesn't come from a standpoint of rebuilding brick by brick. Um, it's really at aiming at rewiring how we fund safety, social safety nets at the end of the day, and green jobs and household costs and so many other things. So let's maybe jump into like the first couple of things that I'm thinking about are, you know, how is this going to, in fact, and affect the middle class, and like what's the scope? So, the Big Beautiful Bill is about 1,000 pages long. Candidly, I didn't read the entire thing. I took the cliff notes, and really, what this bill is doing is it's merging tax policy, healthcare, social programs, defense, border security, education, energy, and many other things into one bill. And economists today are projecting that this is going to increase the federal deficit by between 2 to 4.5 million or trillion dollars, not million, trillion dollars over the next 10 years. Depending on obviously like extensions and interest rate costs, which I think is why Trump is he's been very outspoken about wanting the feds to cut rates. So, I think that there's a lot to take in with this bill, and quite frankly, I don't think there's many Americans that are going to read the 1,000 pages of that. So, I'm going to give you what I believe is the cliff notes. So, we're going to first start with like the tax and middle class relief and what does this do? So, there's permanent tax cuts that are coming. And this is really an extension of what Trump was doing in his first um, term. So obviously lower rates, higher standard deduction, which on paper is great for a lot of the middle class, working middle class that use standard deduction. Also enhanced the child tax credit. And then obviously deductions, higher deductions for QBI, which is the qualified business income. So, you know, what that's getting at is it's looking at lower to middle class individuals that use standard deduction. It's looking at small business owners and increasing their QBI deductions. And obviously, those that, a big thing is we know for a long time that uh, the birth rates in the US have been declining. So, I think a part of the way to stimulate maybe some of that is providing some of those child tax credits to be able to incentivize individuals to have children. So some of the new additions are, deductions on tips, overtime, and then interest on car loans. So it also this limits, the Social Security tax on middle class income earners as well. So there won't be, there's going to be limitations on the taxes for those as well. Raises the SALT cap to $40,000 from 10,000 for filers under 500K. So if you're an income earner making less than $500,000, you are going to the SALT cap has increased to $40,000, which is a $30,000 increase from the 10K it was prior. And then also they introduced the Trump accounts, which is basically $1,000 government seed for kids born 2025 to 2028. Up to 5K per year contributions for education, training, or home down payment. So this is real once again getting at trying to stimulate birth rates here, trying to provide incentives that may give people that were born during those time frames what they call the Trump era. Um, some incentive and some savings towards some of the issues that they continue to say are underlying. Now, what I will say is that $1,000 is not life changing, but it's more than what we've gotten. So those are some of the benefits. Now, I think the things that we need to talk about around, so that's the tax cuts and stuff. Overall, I would say pretty solid from a tax perspective. Now let's jump into healthcare. So this is where things get interesting. So there's deep Medicaid and Affordable Care Act subsidy cuts, so about 1 to 1.2 trillion in reductions over a decade, which will be about 10 to 17 million losing coverage. So, we're talking about a substantial part of America losing coverage from Medicaid because of these cuts. So while we are adding back, on the tax side, you're going to get some benefits. Well, we're also adding expenses to your plate by cutting Medicaid, right? So this is obviously going to push healthcare costs up. The other thing that we just saw was that they removed the law that says that healthcare debt could not be sent to collections. That is no longer in place and is going away. So we will be seeing that, you can, um, you companies can go after you for not paying your healthcare costs. Also implemented stricter eligibility, so work requirements. So every 6 months, there's going to be verification on whether or not you are able to work. There's a 5-year waiting period for green card holders to be able to get medical subsidy. So that's also, obviously an attack on a lot of people that are immigrants. Um, you know, there's also been cuts to SNAP. So, food stamps, which, it shifts 5% of the benefits and 75% of the admin costs to states, plus error-based penalties. So, a lot of the SNAP stuff is going to start to move towards the states, and the federal government is no longer going to be the ones to really provide subsidy for those things. Moving on to defense and immigration and border security. So we're going to boost defense spending by 150 billion. So that includes like drones, missile defense, AI, nuclear, shipbuilding, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to see, like we see in this era where, I think a lot of this comes off the heels of like impending war. Like I think that we are a lot closer to a war than people believe. And a lot of that means that the Trump administration believes that we need to invest more into our defense. Oh, excuse me. Um, so 70 to 170 billion for border wall, ICE, and I think this goes back to we're in a very weird times right now where people are being deported based on their race, their status within the country, and we're seeing the Trump administration double down on that by investing money into border security, education, and student aid. So um, we did see expansion in the Pell Grant eligibility, which includes workforce and trade programs. We know that trades have kind of been a dying industry for a while now, so trying to stimulate that industry as well. Um, we also this it also eliminated subsidized federal undergraduate loans, which I think education in this country is just too expensive as it is. So to eliminate the subsidized federal undergrad loans is a little disheartening. Tax hike on large university endowments. So approximately 8% on schools like Harvard and Yale. So we know now that like the Trump administration is really coming after some of those schools with large endowments and is planning to have a tax hike on those to be able to, make up for the deficit that we potentially are going to be in. From an environment and energy standpoint, we rolled back the EV incentives. I think that we all saw over the past probably month, the kind of debacle and back and forth between Elon Musk and Trump. Well, a part of that was because of Trump rolling back the EV credits. Trump says that Elon knew about this prior to when he was endorsing him. And I think that some of that could be true. I think, you know, um, I think that you know, people should be able to choose what type of vehicle they want to drive. However, we know the effects of gas and carbon on our environment. So, I really liked that EV credit because I did think that it incentivized us to have a cleaner environment, which I think is important for us long term. Um, so, you know, I guess let's talk about who's the gain and who's the lose. So, middle class families, basically those earning 50K or less, are going to see an increase in take home pay, approximately up to about 10K per year. thanks to some of these expanded credits and deductions. The upper and wealthy, they saw the increase in the SALT cap and the endowment tax limit, but um, benefit more in absolute tax savings. So we know that this bill is more structured to those that are on that kind of upper to wealthy kind of um, I guess hierarchy. And then the low income households, they're going to lose Medicaid, food aid, um, and even with tax relief, I think that they're going to be a much more worse position than they were beforehand. And then obviously immigrants and trans people, um, face new disqualifications to healthcare benefits due to some of these. So, for the lower income households, the immigrants and trans people, like this is a tough bill for them. And I think that when we think about policy and we think about our administration and some of those, we need to be thinking about it through the lens of the utilitarian approach. How is this impacting majority of the people, and not just the small subset of people? So, all in all, for the middle class, as far as taxes go, mostly positive, more deductions and credits. For healthcare, negative. It'll be higher costs, reduced coverages, reduced coverage access. Social Security is kind of mixed. There's some tax relief, but you also are losing SNAP and Medicaid support. So, kind of up in the air on that one. Um, Education is also mixed. Pell Aid is up, but student loans are cut. Clean energy is negative. There's fewer incentives to keep our environment clean. And then national security is neutral. It doesn't materially affect the household. So in my opinion, like dollars in this bucket could have been allocated maybe a little differently or a little better to try to service all individuals that live in America and not just a certain subset. So, but all in all, like anything, there's good and bad to every policy. I'm not here to talk and sway, you know, you one side of the spectrum, whether left or right. What I am here to do is give you information. So, I think that this is going to be something that's going to continuously evolving. We're going to be continuously seeing things. Um, you know, we're going to continuously be seeing how this is affecting every class subset. And, I think the reality is that there's going to be quite a bit of cleanup come 2028. And I'm not sure what that cleanup is going to look like, but I think over time that will start to become more visible. So, with all this being said, policy is never going to be perfect. There's always going to be people that are going to be upset about a policy. There's always going to be people that are going to be happy about a policy. And I think the closer that we can get to that middle ground, the better. I think that we just have to all understand that, like, we all are people, we all have different needs. And sometimes that means that as a neighbor, you might have to lean in and help someone that's in need, and hoping that later down the line, once they're back on their feet, that they can pay that back forward, right? And I think if we do enough of that, then we get to the policy that makes sense from a utilitarian approach for all people and not just a few subsets. So, with that being said, thank you so much for being here with me tonight. My name is Andre Creighton. I am your host. I look forward to seeing you all in the next episode of Financially Fit Podcast.
You know Shaletta makes you laugh, but did you know Shaletta Brundage can also make you think and boost your business? Media personality, activist, and comedian Shaletta Brundage founded Shaletta Makes Me Laugh to celebrate and share the best of Black culture. It's a podcasting platform. You can download 10 weekly podcasts hosted by African-American subject experts at ShalettaMakesMeLaugh.com or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. ShalettaMakesMeLaugh.com is also a production house, creating broadcast quality commercial content. And Shaletta and her team of storytellers create powerful promotional campaigns to get businesses the brand awareness they're looking for. Some of Minnesota's top businesses trust Shaletta, and you can too. Get out the word about your events and products and get in front of communities of color with ShalettaMakesMeLaugh.com. She's got the power to help your business.
To keep my home running smooth, I count on Xfinity Internet. With 99.9% reliability, we're all online at once. No slowdowns. The Xfinity app lets me manage our Wi-Fi and keep things secure. Xfinity makes it easy.